Hey everybody, it's Emily at Arc Schooling, and I'm kicking off our 4-part back to homeschool, what we're doing for 10th grade plans. I have a lot to talk about. That's why I'm breaking this up into 4 videos like I did last year, because I don't think anyone wants to sit here for a full hour to hear what I have to say about what we're doing this year. So I'm gonna start today, and we're gonna talk about, I think, the thing that most people are the most interested in hearing about, and that is our history plans. And these are both like history and science, and I'm calling it Morbid Curiosities, the darker side of history and science. This was all inspired completely by my daughter's running joke about cannibalism and she's constantly jokes about it, and we briefly read about the Donner Party a few years back when we did American history, and she thought that was really weird and cool, and that's just a thing she brings up a lot. So I saw this book, Cannibalism, A Perfectly Natural History by Bill Shute, and immediately was oh, we need to do something with that. That would be so fun. And it spawned this entire project. So we're basically going to be reading a lot about weird, morbid history and science. And I'm going to break this down today in categories because that's how I've organized it. We have groupings that we're going to be doing. So for cannibalism, this is going to be our spine for both history and science, but it's a lot of both. But I'm counting it as science. And I'm going to get more into the weeds of what we're doing here, but this is mostly a history course. I'm counting this as a credit for history, essentially, even though there is science in it, and we'll talk more about that later. But we're going to start the year reading about cannibalism, and this book is literally everything you'd want to know, and it talks about cannibalism with animals and cannibalism through history. So we're talking about cannibalism in the Bible, and Neanderthals and the guys on the other valley. Were dinosaurs cannibals? It does go into the Donner Party in this, but we might skip that chapter because our other book we're going to be reading for cannibalism is The Indifferent Stars Above, The Harrowing Saga of the Donner Party by Daniel James Brown. I love this book. This is one of my favorite nonfiction books I've ever read, and I'm really excited that Regina's old enough for this now because I think she's going to love this. This is really, really in-depth, all about everything you'd ever want to know about the Donner Party, and it's just really well done. It's written in almost, it feels like a novel, even though it's not. It's very gripping. And so these 2 books will comprise our cannibalism unit. And if you're curious, this is in Build Your Libraries level 12. I'm borrowing things. If I ever wrote this out as an actual for sale thing, I probably would find something else since this is already in level 12. But honestly, I don't know what else we would use because this is the book. Okay, so after we wrap up cannibalism, our next unit is death. Literally death. And so I have 3 books for the history side and 2 books for the science side. So for the history side, and when I say history, I'm using that loosely. I guess more social studies because this is a geography book essentially. And that is From Here to Eternity by Caitlin Dowdy, Traveling the World to Find the Good Death. And this is her book about learning about different death cultures around the world. And so each chapter is a different location, so Colorado and Indonesia and North Carolina, Mexico. So she's traveling the world and finding out how different cultures, different places deal with death. And I've been wanting to read this for forever, so this is just my excuse, honestly, to make myself pick it up because I'm going to read it with Regina. I also have Written in Bone. I've Written in Bone, Hidden Stories in What We Leave Behind by Sue Black. This is a forensic anthropologist, and so she's going to teach us about bones and how those remains can tell us things about like what happened to the person and what we can learn from bones from a forensic standpoint. And I just think this sounds really interesting. There's a chance this is just a little too in-depth, in which case I do have this alternate book called Bones Never Lie, How Forensics Help Solve History's Mysteries by Elizabeth McLeod. And this is like, I would say young adult, but it's probably somewhere like bordering middle grade young adult. And it's got a lot of color, illustrations, photography, that kind of thing in it. So I'm hoping this works with Regina, but if it doesn't, this is my backup plan. And I also have The Nature of Life and Death, Tales of a Forensic Ecologist. And this is by Patricia Wiltshire. Again, like a lot of this stuff is things I already had on my shelves because I really enjoy a lot of this morbid stuff. Like I like reading about death. I like reading about like weird morbid topics. So I really did a lot of shelf shopping here, and I already had this because it just sounds really interesting. It says it's a must read for true crime fans. This is written by a forensic ecologist, botanist, and paleontologist with a background in environmental archaeology. And she's worked with police forces and stuff, so it just sounds really cool. So I'm excited for that one. And this kind of borders on the science side of things, but I do have two specific science-y books. One of them is one I've already read, Stiff by Mary Roach, The Curious Lives of Human Cadavers. I read this years ago and loved it. And this honestly got me really into reading more morbid things. I mean, I've always read morbid things, but this was the first, like, book I've read about corpses. And I just, like, found it fascinating. That's really what this is. This is what happens to you when you die from a scientific standpoint, like what happens to your body, literally. And everything you'd ever want to know about a corpse. And then this one I have not read yet, but have been really wanting to read, so I'm very excited. That is 6 Feet Over by Mary Roach. And this one is Science Tackles the Afterlife. This is a topic that I won't say I'm obsessed with, but I'm very deeply curious about. And it's something that I think my daughter is going to really, really like, because it's a topic we talk about frequently, because we do, of course. In a morbid household, what else do you talk about? But I'm really curious about this book. It's a lot to do with, like, the science behind, like, well, what's really going on with ghosts, for example, that kind of thing. Like, what does science say happens after you die? So that will comprise our death unit. Okay, so our next section is murder. And I have too much in this one, honestly, but I'm gonna do my best here. We're gonna get through it. So I really wanted to tackle Jack the Ripper. And this is The Five, The Untold Lives of the Women Killed by Jack the Ripper by Hallie Rubenhold. I've been, like, so interested in reading this. This is a, like, really in-depth, like, who were these women? Why might they have been targets? Let's flip the whole narrative on what we think we know about these women. And so I'm really excited about this one, because I could not think, like, what better source, what better book is there? I bought From Hell by Alan Moore and Eddie Campbell. This is a behemoth of a book. Like, it's so big, but it's a graphic novel, so even though it's gigantic, I think it's going to read pretty quickly. And this is a sort of, like, in-depth, ambitious work about, like, detailing the events leading up to the Whitechapel killings and the cover-up that followed. It says, From Hell is a meditation on the mind of a madman whose savagery and violence gave birth to the 20th century. So I've been wanting to read this for a while. So this whole thing is giving me an excuse to pick up the things that I've had, like, lingering that I want to read and have not had a chance to do so. So we're going to be reading that together. And then I also have Lady Killers, Deadly Women Throughout History by Tori Telfer. I've had this on my shelves. you're going to hear that a lot. I've had this on my shelves for a while because I just think it sounds really cool. This is a collection of biographies about murderous women in history. So we have like Elizabeth Bathory, we have Lizzie Halliday, we have the Queen of Poisoners, Marie Madeleine, the Marquis de Brinvilliers. So like there's a whole lot going on in this book with a bunch of like women murderers, serial killers, all of that kind of stuff. So very excited about that. And then I also have All the Living and the Dead. Is that right? I've gotten something backwards. Oh no. My bad. Surprising no one. I have made a mistake. I have made an error. I mixed up some books. Backing up. Back to the Death Unit. I have All the Living and the Dead by Haley Campbell. This is the book we are using in that unit. This is a book about different jobs that are related to death, and the author says she had a childhood fascination with death, and she wants to search for answers in people who make a living by working with the dead. So this is the book we're using for the Death Unit, because actually these go in our Murder Unit, because I have a bunch of history books. These are the science books. I don't know why I mixed that up. Anywho, these two books that I've already talked about, Written in Bone and The Nature of Life and Death. These two, I think the title on this one is what threw me, but these two go in our Murder Unit. These are the science books, so, you know, don't mind me mixing up my own project that I've written about for the last, like, couple of months. So that comprises our Murder Units. Okay, so for our next unit, we're going to talk about historical disasters. And this will be the spine book for that. And this is How to Survive History, How to Outrun a Tyrannosaurus, Escape Pompeii, Get Off the Titanic, and Survive the Rest of History's Deadliest Catastrophes by Cody Cassidy. And this is a bunch of just like different chapters on different disasters throughout history. So it kicks off with like the dinosaur age, and you're going to learn about what happened to the dinosaurs, and goes through the ice age, and it goes straight through history. It doesn't have everything. There are some disasters that I would have liked to see in here, but for the most part this has a lot of stuff in it that will get us through. So it talks about ancient Egypt and Pompeii. It talks about the sack of Rome, the Black Death, the fall of Constantinople. The Donner Party is in here. We'll probably skip that chapter since we're going pretty in depth on the Donner Party at the beginning of the year. I don't know that we need to rehash it, but maybe. We'll see. The Titanic is in here. So we're going to be using this as like our spine. I was trying to figure out what would fit here. What did I already own? I was trying so hard not to buy too many things. And I have The Age of Dinosaurs, The Rise and Fall of the World's Most Remarkable Animals by Steve Brusatte. So I think we're going to read this. And this is exactly what it sounds like. It's going to tackle everything you'd want to know about dinosaurs. And this is, I think, the young adult or the young reader's edition of his adult book, and I think this would go over better with Regina. So that is what I pulled for us to read. When we get to Pompeii, I wanted to read this because this is like one of my favorite things that I have maintained from my childhood. I don't have a lot of my favorite books from my childhood left, but I still have this one. This is The Secrets of Vesuvius by Sarah C. Bissell. This book had me nearly wanting to be an archaeologist. Like, I remember when I was a kid, I used to love hanging out at the library in our synagogue. The rabbi was really into archaeology, and we had a lot of like magazines about archaeology, and I was like in my archaeology phase, and I got this book so many times from the library, I think, that my father bought me a copy. And this was my favorite book when I was a kid. I was obsessed with it. This is sort of like a back and forth between like a historical fiction story about a young slave girl who lived in Herculaneum, and like her day leading up to the eruption of Mount Vesuvius. And so that's in between chapters that are about like the actual archaeologist studying at that site today, or today in the 90s. This was written like in like either the late 80s or the 90s. I'm not sure. This came out in 1990. I was 10. So I still have this. I think it's still really well done, and I'm hoping Regina likes it, unless she doesn't think it's too babyish. And then we're not going to read this whole book. I've talked about it in a book haul before. I hoped, but I don't think she would really get a lot out of the entire thing. But I feel like maybe we'll read some of this, and that is Voices from Chernobyl by Svetlana Alexievich. And then I think what I want to do, because I still wanted to make sure we cover Chernobyl as like a major disaster, like how could we skip that? I do have a book for her to read. Like, I'm gonna assign her to read The Blackbird Girls because I loved this book. This is by Anne Blankman. It's middle grade, but I would say this is like one of those like bridge books that it could be for YA or middle grade. Like, I think younger teens would get a lot out of this, and so I think Regina will like it. And this is about two girls and their experiences, like escaping and getting out of Chernobyl, but not knowing what's happening to their parents, and like living through the disaster, basically. And it's just really well done. And so I think we're going to read a few snippets of this. This is a whole bunch of first-hand accounts, like an oral history of what happened, the experiences of people who lived through it. So I think we're going to read a little bit of this, and I think we're going to watch the HBO like mini-series Chernobyl, because I think that was really well done, and I think she'd get a lot more out of that than if I tried to read her a whole bunch of stuff. So that will be our historical disasters unit. And then finally, we have one unit left. I had like big ideas about how much stuff we were going to read, and like once I started to actually plan it out, my book list shrank a bit. So I had a lot more stuff in this unit, but I think these two books are going to be more than enough anyway, but that's all we really have time for. So I have Dr. Mooter's Marvels. This is by Christian O'Keefe Apadowitz, and like I am just obsessed with this cover. This is my aesthetic, basically. Creepy, weird library, skulls. Yes. So this is a book, I'll just read you the back because I won't be able to summarize this as well. It says, America in the early 1800s was an easy place to die, especially for those unlucky souls so severely deformed that medicine at the time literally classified them as monsters. Enter Thomas Dent Mooter, a brilliant and audacious young mid-19th century plastic surgeon who revolutionized American medicine with his daring surgical work, pioneering the use of anesthesia, championing the sterilization of surgical tools, and advocating for a compassion-based vision for helping even the most seemingly hopeless of patients, despite intense resistance from his numerous rivals. Sounds really, really interesting. So I'm excited for us to read this together. And then that's our history book. And then for the science side of things, we're going to read Patient Zero, A Curious History of the World's Worst Diseases. And this is by Lydia Kang, MD, and Nate Pedersen. And this just goes like disease by disease. And it talks about who was Patient Zero, and what is this disease, and what does it do to you, and it's really interesting. And there's lots of like pictures in it. It's really beautiful to look at. Like the book is gorgeous, and it smells nice. If you're a person who wonders about things like that, this is a really nice to smell book. So it covers things like Ebola, the plague, mad cow disease, yellow fever, HIV, typhus, measles, leprosy, like all like the major diseases, and it talks about what that disease is, how it affects the body, what it, like that kind of stuff, the history of it, but also Patient Zero when we know, that kind of thing. So those are all of the books that we're going to be reading for the history and science portions of Morbid Curiosities. I'm so excited about this. I'm glad we took a left turn here. I was going to make this easy on myself and just do levels 10 and 11 next, because they're already done. But am I the kind of person that can just do a thing and not plan? No, I am not. I am the kind of person that needs a project. So I'm glad we're doing this though, because it's going to be a really fun year, I think. And I can't wait to get started. So that's going to be it for this first video. In the next one, I'm going to be talking about what we're going to be doing for read alouds. So stay tuned for that. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Happy reading. Bye.